achieve with almost nothing at hand. Our tendency to create fiscal and legal cobwebs that entrap rather than empower. Our system should help empower, not entrap. The new Companies Act that we have now come up with is so influenced by Satyam that it is nothing about empowerment. It's about entrapment. It's undoable. And it's making the life of audit committees and boards almost impossible. So I think, these are the sorts of thinking we have to get out of. This is still Soviet thinking. Our failure to concentrate public policy objectives on the end consumer, the citizen. Why do you think Kejriwal had so much influence? Because finally, he was saying, I'm concerned about the citizen, I'm not concerned about the bureaucratic processes and all of that. Now, unfortunately, when you see what's happening in Delhi, where the chief minister is doing a dharna outside Rail Bhavan and calling himself an anarchist, then you have a worry, so who are these people? What do they have? Our myopic vision, reluctance to undertake long-term strategic visioning, just don't do it. We don't do it at the state level, we don't do it at the central level, we're just not doing it. We're not doing it even in our foreign policy, if you really look at it. They never got the growth they needed in an economy where tele-densities were very low. So we said you must go to revenue share. Let the system grow and then you share the revenues as they come in rather than trying to take it up front. So it's a completely different way of looking at it, and that saved the telecom industry. What did they do for FM radio? Did they learn? No. High license fees drove the FM radio companies into the ground. Then they came up with revenue share for radio. Just do not learn from our experiences, and we waste 10 years in the process. Because that whole process takes about 10 years. You start with something, you end with something, and you're back to square one. So this is the other habit. So I think these are 7 habits which in India we have to transform. We have to move away from all of this, completely rethink how we're doing it. And the last slide I want to leave you is with the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi ji, who also had 7 habits. He said these are the 7 habits which, if present in your society, will spell ruin. And we have to turn it around. And unfortunately, when I keep reading these 7 habits, it's all there. So we have to be able to address them somehow. And these are the 7 habits. Wealth without work. Easy money. Pleasure without conscience. Knowledge without character. Knowledge itself is not sufficient. You have to build character. What gets you through life is your character. In education, it's character. Not marks. What gets you through life is character. Commerce without morality. Science without humanity. Religion without sacrifice. Religion is about sacrifice. Politics without principles. Now tell me, are these all present? Yeah? So we have to work on this. So this is part of the societal dialogue that we have to work on. Is how do we turn this around? And maybe we have to start with here, which will turn everything else around as we start moving along. But clearly, I think that the depth in these 7 habits is so profound that we need to be able to deal with it. So thank you very much. Any happy to take any questions that you want. Yeah.
times we have been hearing very strong critique of the government, its inefficiency, its inability to provide a kind of human development with some sort of evenness and justice. I also feel that there is also simultaneously equally strong eulogies that we hear about the market and the market's inability to bring change, the market's inability to bring efficiency, to bring results, achieve objectives, all that. And then linking it to what you said, which I think the paradise lost for India happened with democracy. So I'm just wondering whether, what do you think about the moral legitimacy of democracy in India? Do you see any value? Do you think a CEO instead of a prime minister will be able to handle India better?
It's a good question. I get it all the time when I speak about it. My answer to that is we need more democracy, not less. This idea of an autocrat or a benign dictator is nonsense. It's not going to work. You need more democracy, and you need true democracy. Today you have a situation where those in power are above the law. You have a police force which cannot investigate politicians. You have a system that is completely skewed. So in a sense, you have a different class. The political class seem to be insulated from the rest of us. The law is subject to us, but is not subject to them until they lose power. Then it hits you. But there are all sorts of issues that we need to be able to address it. We have taken colonial control of the police to a different level. In fact, we should have completely changed it around. Today, if you see a politician in London, if he's caught drinking driving, do you think he'll get away with it? The magistrate will be tougher on the politician because he should be setting an example to the citizen. Here it's the reverse. Today, Mukesh Ambani's son can, have a huge accident in a car, and nobody ever hears about it. If somebody else does it, it's going to be in deep trouble. So there is a different rules for different people. That is not democracy. That's autocracy. So in a sense, we have something very different. And the issue is, how do we bring democracy where everybody is equal under the law into a different paradigm? That's why I think Arvind Kejriwal's thing about red battis and all that, these are symbols. But it's a symbol of apparatchiks and commissars of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, the apparatchiks, commissars, they had their dakas in the countryside, and they lived like kings. The rest of the citizens were in labor camps. So it is that distinction that we have to break. So in a sense, I would say, one, the answer to your question is more democracy and real democracy. There are different pillars: the rule of law, the free press, fair electoral system, and representation of the people's representations in Parliament have to be people's representations in Parliament. They cannot be criminals. You cannot have, I don't know how many rapists there are in the Lok Sabha, or how many criminals there are in the Lok Sabha. I mean, how can you have this? Does any democracy have it? Do you have it in the US or whatever? And you have a government which passes an ordinance, or wants to pass an ordinance, which justifies criminality in politics. This is the government itself, until Rahul Gandhi said this is nonsense. And then they tore it up. That's also not democracy, because how can a Rahul Gandhi tell government and a cabinet to do what he wants him to do? So, it's a bizarre situation. We need to be more serious about the processes of government that we have, and especially the state level. I go to Lucknow a lot, and if you look at the way UP government is run, it's frightening. Your life is worth the price of a bullet. Full stop. So it's anarchy of huge proportions. Therefore, you can't get development. Now, who is going to invest in UP when you have a governance like that? Nobody. So look what happened to Tata Motors in West Bengal when Mamta was there. So the point is that everybody withdraws then. Unless you have frameworks of governance, that there is certain clear and sustainable that people believe in it, trust in it, you're not going to get the investment and the growth that you want. Why do you think Bombay as a financial center could have wiped out Singapore and Dubai? Nobody could have competed with us if Bombay had a governance framework and a financial center. All the brain powers here. We chose not to do it. Today, who benefits from it? Singapore in the east and Dubai in the west. That's it. They are thriving on it. We are not prepared to do it ourselves because we had the Percy Mystery report 5 years ago. He said these are the 82 things you need to do in the next 2 years. After 2 years, we had him back. Not one had been done. Not interested, not caring. We don't care. We don't want to do it. So let others benefit. That is not democracy. We need a completely overhaul. That's why I said one of the dialogues has to be, what is this thing that we are building in India? How will this democracy work? How will it serve all the people? So I think it's a very serious issue. It's the serious issue, because unless you have good leadership, you will not get the other changes that you want to see happen. And I don't think the young MPs, I thought the MPs below 40 would do much more than they have done. Today, they don't seem to have done what they should. Their voices should be heard. Stephen Covey's 8th habit is very important for India. What's his 8th habit? Anybody read his book? Extremely important. Please read it. His 8th habit is find your voice and help others find theirs. We have to find our voice. And as youngsters, you guys have to find your voice. And you've got to help others find theirs. It's this collective consciousness which will change what we are. It can only happen ground up. It cannot happen top down. It will not happen top down. It can only happen ground up when people say enough is enough, this has to change.
What are your views on the rising non-performing assets problem in the public sector, in the public banking sector?
It is a major problem. A large part is because of infrastructure projects. At one time, about 7-8 years ago, in fact, even when I was in IDFC, the public sector went gung-ho on project finance. And they went gung-ho on project finance without factoring in credit risk. Because nobody understands project finance. Project finance is an extremely risky business. It's not like normal lending. And as a result of which, all the sorts of problems we envisaged happened. Today, a lot of the problems in project finance, government inability to give land for roads, power pricing policy, energy pricing policies brought power stations to a halt. Therefore, there are no cash flows. So actually, a lot of these problems are government policy oriented. Once you fix the policy and you get the power stations working and everything else working, then the cash flows will start and the banks will be in better situation. So I don't think there's any systemic risk to the system. It's not like a US system or where things just roll out. It is a serious situation for the moment. But it can be fixed if government starts to be clearer on its policy framework on infrastructure. Infrastructure is a large part of it. The other is, of course, the industrial meltdown, which I talked to you about. Because as industry falls apart, and this is, huge declines, the SME sector, small and medium enterprises, get very badly affected because they are suppliers to the big boys. And the components, parts, ancillaries, they don't get paid. The whole system goes into, in fact, I'm also seeing this in the DCB Bank, that the MSME and the SME sector has been highly strained for a cash flow problem, not because of a systemic problem of the products they're making, but there's just no cash.
So my question basically is about perspective. Like, sir, you have studied from abroad and you are here at such a position. So my question is basically, is there any difference if we study from abroad and come back to India, and if we study from a very well-known institute of India and and we enter the banking sector, so would there be a specific amount of growth, or would there be a specific difference from a graduate from outside or an Indian graduate, with reference to obviously if we aim to be at your position?
I think in my day there probably was, and today there isn't. You know, there's such good institutions in India today that I'm hoping that you see that, you know, we're equivalent to almost anywhere else, and it's seen as that. Plus you have the added advantage that you're sensitive to the problems that India has. You're not coming from an international perspective and international case studies, but India has a very specific type of problem that we need to deal with. And if you're sensitive, the biggest problem we have, at least in corporate recruitment that I've seen, is that you might be an MBA, but that's just like a qualification to enter. We have to retrain you completely. Most companies have to go through massive retraining. I shouldn't say retraining, but let's say enhanced training. You obviously have the fundamentals, but a lot of new training has to go on to make yourself fit into that corporate culture and that corporate. So your training actually just keeps going for quite a while. MBA is not the end of it. You know, you'll have to move through it. So it doesn't really matter. Quite honestly, I don't think it matters too much whether you've come from abroad or even in terms of qualification. I think the good institutions in India are just as acceptable than any other. Yeah. 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 You know, on the Jaguar Land Rover story, the British could not turn around Jaguar Land Rover. The Germans could not turn it around. The Yanks couldn't turn it around. Indians did. When we took over Jaguar Land Rover, it was in a mess. Huge debt, product lines that were not fully developed, all sorts of problems. In 3 years, we made Jaguar Land Rover absolutely the top of its industry, brought British design and British production on the forefront. We won the best concept designs in everywhere. So I think it's another example. Today the British government talks about how Indians have transformed Jaguar Land Rover, which is wonderful. But the answer to your specific question is exactly that's happening. You know, we have a couple of people now from Jaguar Land Rover creating the gateways and the whole technological gateways for product development, which will improve Tata products, Motors products, immeasurably. There was a gap because, you know, we hadn't got the sort of product profiles in place. So for the next 1 year or 18 months, you'll see variants of existing products, and then you'll see all the new products that we are developing coming into line. So another 18 months, you'll see a whole new SKU of products that are benefiting from JLR.
I think we'll stop here and
Sure.
Sure. Because some other people might be waiting for. I think looking at the watch, I also will have to cut down. Otherwise, there are not enough words to really appreciate the kind of the content and the kind of the challenge that has been posed by Mr. Nasser Munjee. I think it is a very appropriate time in front of the academic audience and the students to raise and describe the fundamental problem of the economy, and with hopes lying into the new generation. I really thank him very much to bring to the fore the fundamental issues that our country has been facing. And I think he termed it very well, that it is a limping giant. India is a limping giant. And I think to make it run and to influence the world, I think this new generation can really do a lot. And especially if we learn the lessons from his summarization, his own 7 habits, as well as Gandhiji's 7 habits. I think if we are able to change them or imbibe them properly, I think the country can be different. We can go back to our 17th centuries where we were really flourishing a lot in the world. So thank you very much, sir. I'm sure that we'll be able to take this forward and change some of the habits. I'll also take the opportunity to thank Praful Bhai as well as Kaldra sir for their support for organizing this event. Madam Trivedi and Professor M.T. Patel also lended a lot of support. I'm not able to take the names of the entire faculty team who really worked very, very hard in such a short time to look into the details so that this program goes on very well. So thanks everybody, and also the students. I'm sure that you must have benefited quite a lot from this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. And I would like to thank Mr. Nasser Munjee once again. Those words were definitely of learning and great inspiration for us. Thank you so much for coming here. On behalf of Amrit Modi School of Management, I would like to thank one and all present here for making this event a successful one. Our special thanks to Mr. Nasser Munjee for sharing his experience and insights with us. Thank you so much. Have a good day.